right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Donahue, and I'm the Education Curator at the Wingate Museum of Art at Hendrix College. I am pleased to co-moderate this program with Matthew Lopas, who is a professor of art and chair of the art department here at Hendrix. He himself is a painter. While we are hosting this program virtually, we want to acknowledge that the Wingate Museum of Art at Hendrix College occupies the traditional homelands of the Osage, Quapaw, and Caddo. We offer respect and gratitude to the Indigenous peoples who have cared for the land over generations. We ask that you please keep your microphone muted to avoid distraction or disruption. If you have any questions during the program, please type them in the chat box and Ray will address them at the end of the program. This evening's artist talk with RayAllenParker accompanies the exhibition Altarpieces and Icons, RayAllenParker, which is on view in the Biggs and Neely galleries through March 12th. Please visit the museum's website at wingatemuseum.org, where you'll find information about all of our spring exhibitions, planning a visit to the museum, and other virtual programs, including a lecture coming up on Monday, March 1st, with art historian Leo Mazow, who will be sharing his perspective on this exhibition. We are honored to have RayAllenParker with us this evening. The son of a sailor, Ray grew up in U.S. Navy towns from California to Florida to Hawaii and Washington before his family settled in rural Egypt, Arkansas. He earned bachelor's and master's degrees in English from the University of Arkansas, where he also took his first painting class. Ray then had a 3-decade career in retail advertising and communications before returning to art and his lifelong interest in portrait and figure painting. Through large-scale works that strive to be both old masterly and contemporary, he explores the complex topography of the human face and figure. In 2020, Ray was awarded one of 3 individual artist fellowships in painting from the Arkansas Arts Council. In 2019, he was a semi-finalist in Figurativas, an annual international painting and sculpture competition in Barcelona, Spain. Ray lives and works in Fayetteville, Arkansas with his wife, Mary Jean. Ray, welcome and thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the wonderful introduction.
You bet.
Are we ready? Are we ready to do this?
Let's go ahead and do your screen sharing.
Everyone, keep your fingers crossed.
This is the moment.
So far, so good.
That looks great, Ray. Take it away.
Let's see. How do I hide everyone's pictures?
If you go up to the top right corner, there should be a little view button. And I think you'll be able to select the view either. It looks like you might want to do full screen. I have a great view of you right now and your presentation. I'm not sure if everyone sees the same thing or not, but.
Okay. You can see her, but my unpaid assistant just ran in from off screen and set everything up for me. So, thank you everyone for being here. And this has been the highlight of my artistic career. And I want to thank everyone at the Wingate Museum of Art for this extraordinary opportunity. It's an absolutely beautiful facility. And I'm so honored to have my paintings shown here. And I also want to extend thank you to Mary Kennedy, without whom none of this would have been possible. I want to start off with a short art statement. I promise you this is the only thing that I'll read to you all night, but I think this will give you a lens through which to see all of my work and a through line from my bio to my progress to the work into the museum and beyond. I believe in heroic paintings, large-scale naturalistic works that explore the human figure in a convincing painterly way, that rewards slow looking and draws close to their subjects, revealing who they are as we consider what it means to be us. As Sarah said, I went to the University of Arkansas where I got a BA and MA in English literature. I was convinced I was going to be a writer of some kind. And I took only one painting class while I was there from the incomparable Donald Roller Wilson. And I'd signed up for this class without any training whatsoever. The last art I had done probably was in high school, where I decorated the library bulletin board and where I drew baseball logos on my brother's notebooks. So I took this class and I did pretty well in it. But what I discovered was that painting required everything from me. And by everything, I mean everything emotionally, physically, and intellectually. And at that time, I really wasn't ready to commit to those things. And so I turned my back on art for about 4 decades and literally didn't pick up a pen or a pencil. Instead, I went to work for the JCPenney company, working in corporate communications, marketing, and finally advertising. And I did that for over 30 years. And you can see in this picture, which is done for a publication, me sitting next to Chairman W.R. Howe, who was presiding over one of the largest retail companies in the world. And it looks like I'm giving him what for. Here's another piece from a marketing brochure around that time. This is for credit marketing, which I conceived of, wrote, edited, oversaw, and in this case, I even served as a model. And the young gentleman on my left there is my son Benjamin, whom you may know from the painting Post-Punk. Incidentally, it looks like we flew to the Grand Canyon on location for this shot, but actually it was done in a ditch out behind the corporate headquarters. When I retired, we moved back to Fayetteville. And I was determined to go back into art and see if there was anything left in the tank, if indeed I had any talent and was the interest really there for me. And so I enrolled in the regular intro courses. And this is the first drawing that I did of myself for one of those classes. And I was so proud when it was put up in the hallways behind glass cases. And I actually dragged my wife up to the university to take a look at it, although she's seen it many times before. This was my first painting self-portrait that I did an intro to painting. I think it looks a little bit like Popeye myself. Here's another painting that I did as a final project for one of the intro classes. And this was the first time I felt like I had done something that was original and powerful and pleasing to me. And I got good feedback from my class. And by the time I accomplished this, I felt like my path going forward was set, and I was determined to be an artist from then on. I was working out of my spare bedroom, and it got to the point where there were so many paintings in there, I could only stand one way and without moving because of all the paintings stacked against the wall. So I needed a studio, so I got out a yellow legal pad and designed something really quickly, and I had this built. This is about 60 feet from my house, so I now have about a 30-second walk in the morning to my studio. As Sarah pointed out, I am the son of a sailor. I was born in San Diego, and these are my parents. And I think we must have been very proud of our automobile, because whenever we had photos taken, we always stood in front of our car. But later, when I started painting, my family became the first source of interest for me. And I was able to use the car as a measuring device to size these two different photos and combine them. And you can see the result here as it starts taking place. I drew the background in freehand. The clouds I did in a mad 9-hour wet into wet painting session. And this was the final version, Nuclear Family. It's 6x8, the first large painting that I was able to do thanks to the fact that I was in a new studio. The title Nuclear Family refers not only to the central family unit, but also the possibility of nuclear annihilation that hung over all of us that grew up in the 1950s. Later, my family settled in rural Egypt, Arkansas. It's in the Northeast near Jonesboro. And these are my parents, and you can see there are thousands and thousands of empty acres all around us. And I wanted to make a painting of this. And you can see here the final result. Again, this is 6 feet by 8 feet. And I added a shotgun and jammed a cigarette in my father's mouth, trying to make him look a little more dangerous. I thought he looked like one of the killers from the movie In Cold Blood. So this is my effort to toughen him up. The family still continued to be a source of inspiration for me. And this is one of my first forays into a multiple panel painting. So this is a quartet, and as you can see, it's 5 feet by over 12 feet. And its subject, besides being the family and the individuals that comprise that unit, was also the mutability of time. And it had a very muted palette. And in fact, I did a lot of scarring of the canvas to make it look used and old, like my family was disappearing into the ages of time. After going through my family, I turned to the closest thing in hand for painting subjects, and that was my neighbors. This is a little girl that lives down the street, and I saw her doing this at a Christmas party. So I was able to talk her into coming up to the studio and performing the same gymnastics, and got a painting out of it. This is a painting of another neighbor who lives down the street. And you can see here, I'm working on some cold pressed watercolor paper. I was trying to get a looser, rougher texture, more akin to something like Lucian Freud accomplished in his paintings. And I was very taken with him at the time. And so I was able to do that by working through this new surface. And I sort of jury rigged this structure where I pasted the watercolor paper onto a big piece of styrofoam and stacked it up on the painting tubs. You can see there on the right, my painting table. I work off a glass top on this huge rolling rack, and then get my images off an iPad, which I have attached to this handy dandy holding device that allows me to move the iPad closer, farther away, up and down. This is my lovely neighbor's husband. I showed this for scale. All of these paper paintings were 5 feet by 4 feet. And here's an interior of the studio with all those paintings in place. You can see there on the left, there's a huge drawing. This is over 7 feet tall. This is the largest drawing I've ever made. And in the foreground, you can see Sadie, the super dog, who sat with me through the making of all these paintings, my faithful companion. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us. I look relentlessly and restlessly at paintings and painters always looking for new creative inputs. And this is a painter that I've been particularly enamored of, Chantal Joffe. This is a painting that we saw done by her of the actress Jessica Chastain. And this is a huge piece in the Boston MFA. I don't think my work is anything like Chantal's, but I'm very enamored of her scale and the power and the unfiltered look at her models, although the paintings tend to be even ugly, awkward, but again, I find them very powerful. The last job I had while I was at JCPenney was as the director of the photography studio. And there I had a small army of photographers working under me, models, stylists, photographers, assistants, painters, you name it. And quite by osmosis, I learned to light a set, how to interact with models, how to judge film, how to look at color. And so I've always been very, very attracted to photographers and look at a lot of them as much as I do painters. And this painter in particular, Richard Leroy, has affected me. And he photographs gigantic pieces using a very unique camera obscura style. And this is a painting my erstwhile assistant, Mary Jean, took of me. I jumped up from the breakfast table one Sunday morning and said, let's go shoot some photography. I want to look tough and rough and unkempt. What you don't see is that I'm also wearing my pajamas, and it's really difficult to look rough and tough in your pajamas, let me tell you. And here's the painting in progress that I started from that photography. And I was also working on another large paper piece at that same time. And you can see me standing precariously on a chair. I've used chairs, benches, stools, stood on the tin cans, paint cans rather, all in an effort to get these large paintings done. Here are the two final versions. These were both selected for the annual Delta exhibition in Little Rock, the first time that I had work selected for that. And it was a real thrill for me to go there and see these on a specially built finger wall for them. I moved back to painting on canvas shortly after that and decided that I wanted to paint a picture of my son-in-law, Guy Michael Davis, who I think is one of the finest ceramic artists in the country. He works with my daughter as the artistic duo Future Retrieval. And I asked my daughter to send me photography of Guy Michael to paint from. And she sent one image and said, what about this? And I said, yeah, that's great. That's perfect. Send me 2 or 3, 400 more images to pick from. And none ever came. I kept waiting and she didn't send any more. And finally I went back to the one image and said, you know what? I think this is perfect. And so I used this, and this is the resulting painting from that. As you can see, it's 7 feet by a little over 4 feet. In it, I tried to capture the seriousness, the intensity, but also the whimsy of my son-in-law. This is a picture of my son, Benjamin. I shot this photography while we were on vacation in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I had my son stand under one of the skylights and got some very dramatic photography. And this is the painting that resulted from it. It's called Post-Punk. And I was fortunate to have it selected by the annual Delta exhibition as well. And much to my surprise, it won the Contemporaries Award for painting that year. People often ask me how I get my models. And it's much like dating. You just go and ask people and hope for the best. In this case, there was a food server at a local restaurant where my wife and I love to eat. And I left her my business card. And then when we returned a few weeks later, I asked her if she had had a chance to look at my paintings. And she said no, and but she would. And we returned a few weeks later and asked her again, and she said she had looked at my paintings, but she didn't know why I was trying to sell her my work, because she didn't feel like she could afford it. And then I had to explain to her that I wanted to paint her. I wasn't trying to sell her any work. And so finally, she agreed to come to the studio, where I discovered that, contrary to the very forbidding look that she had with her shaved head and all the tattoos and the missing digit on her ring finger, that she was a very delicate and very petite, beautiful, beautiful person. And I tried to capture all of that in the photography and then translate that to the canvas. And here's the painting that resulted from that. This was the largest painting that I had made up to that point, a little bit more than 8 feet by 5 feet. And I should point out that right after the photography session for this, my subject asked if she could invite her dog into the studio for photography. And I agreed. And when the dog entered, he promptly lifted his leg and peed on one of my paintings, from which I learned incontrovertibly that oil and water do not mix. This is a painting of my wife, Mary Jean. She normally doesn't like to pose for photography, but usually she doesn't mind standing in for my lighting tests. So one day we had done that, and I had one image, and I said, I think we've got it here. And I kept the image on my desktop, and every time I opened the computer, I would see this. And one day I realized this would make a fabulous painting. And so this is the work of art that resulted from that, again, off one single image. This is photography of Madison Schauhorn, who's a Hendrix graduate and a friend of my wife's. And she was also working at a local restaurant. And one day we went there and saw that she had virtually shaved her head, dyed the stubble blonde, and had this extraordinary look. And I was excited about painting her, and she agreed, and we took this photography. And here's the resulting painting, which I called New Blonde. And it too became the largest painting I had ever made. This is a little bit over 7 feet by 6 feet. If I could dwell on this image for just 1 second. There was a London painting show called All Too Human, which brought together all the great painters of the London School of Painting: Lucian Freud, Francis Bacon, Ewan Uglow, R.J. Cottage, on and on. And I thought it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see these artists. And so my wife and I scraped together all of our airline miles and took a trip to go see the show. But on the way, we stopped in Madrid, which we had never been to, and went to the Prado, where I saw this painting, Christ on the Cross by Velázquez, which is also a huge painting. And it was by itself in an alcove. And I was just stunned by its beauty, its scale, the drama of the subject matter. I walked close to it. I left the room and came in from another direction. And then when we left, we came back the next day to see it. I'd never been impacted by a painting like this before. It literally left me weak in the knees. And at that point, I began to think about doing paintings of this sort for myself, not to compare myself to Velázquez by any measure at any time, but I wanted to create large, impactful works like this that people stayed with and that were physically, mentally, intellectually impacted by it. When we went on to the All Too Human show, we saw this work, huge work by Lucian Freud, who I was greatly enamored of. And then we also saw this piece by the artist Jenny Saville. To my mind, I think she's the greatest living artist in the world. And I was just stunned by the scale of this piece, which is 6 feet by 8 feet, by the confrontational look, by the saturated colors. And I knew I wanted to try to do work like this as well. Also on that trip, in contrast to the gigantic work of Jenny Saville, we saw this tiny painting at the Tate Britain by Anthony Van Dyck. And this was the greatest work I had ever seen as far as loading the lights. That's creating light impasto on the forehead, on the collar, and the hair that make the elements, the light elements, all pop forward. And after seeing this, I've always tried to accomplish this in all of my paintings. This is a photography of my friend Sarah, who also worked in a nearby restaurant. And I was always very attracted by her look. And she came to the studio that day wearing her goddess earrings, as she called them, and bringing her son Bodhi in tow, who during the photography session with his mom actually crawled under the chair she was sitting under. And this is the painting that resulted from it, and I called it Bodhi's Mom. It too was selected by the annual Delta exhibition last year. And you can see in this painting, there's the first example of my using some of the brushy painting, loose structure, paint that I'd seen in Jenny Saville's paintings. As I mentioned, I continue to look at paintings obsessively, and this is a piece that just totally blew me away that I saw at the Nelson Atkins in Kansas City. This is by the artist Kehinde Wiley, who you may know from his painting of President Obama. This piece is over 30 feet wide. Also at the Nelson Atkins, I saw this altar piece, and these two pieces, with their scale, their beauty, their sacramental subject matter, really cemented in my mind the desire to do something like the altar pieces that are now showing in the Wingate Museum. This is photography of the artist Hannah McBroom, who is one of the great figurative painters, I think, in America. I love her work. She's a graduate of the University of Arkansas. And I met her at an exhibit of hers at the 21C Hotel in Bentonville. And this was at the end of a grueling 2-year pharmaceutical regimen as she was transitioning to female. And I was really struck by Hannah's statuesque nature, by her beauty, but also really struck by her power, her composure, her confidence, and her willing to go through what she had just done to become the person that she wanted to transform herself into. And I asked her to allow me to paint her, and she agreed. And as I said, this is some of the first photography from that session. And here's one of the first portraits that I did of this. Again, you can see the loose, dribbly painting that I've tried off and on again for years to perfect. When I was talking with Hannah at the 21C, I saw her as a messianic figure. And so this is a photography which she was kind enough to pose as in my studio. And I knew that it was going to be a multiple panel piece and that I would need some kind of sacramental religious symbol to get the altarpiece effect. And so I borrowed this from the Seven Sacraments by Rogier van der Weyden. And you can see I employed it in the background using a series of gold reflective paints that I painted over and over again. You can see also the painting is so wide with the panels in place, I can barely get it into the width of my studio. This photograph shows some of the other symbolic structures that went into the painting. I actually printed this banner out with the Latinate text on it and digitally, or actually manually, threaded it through Hannah's fingers and photographed them to get the banners for the painting. And I did the same thing with the roses, which represent blood of Christ, Mary's love, the crown of thorns. I do have to say my wife was very disappointed the roses were for Hannah's painting and not for her when I brought them home that day. And here's the finished piece of Hannah, which I called Ecce Femina, which is a takeoff from Pontius Pilate's Latinate text when he revealed Christ to the rabble right before Christ's crucifixion. And he said, Ecce homo, behold the man. In my case, it's behold the woman. Oops. Here's another set of my neighbors. I had met these people at City Hall. The whole neighborhood was fighting off a somewhat rapacious developer who was going to strip one of the lots of all the trees and fill in a retention pond. And we were going to City Hall every Tuesday night. And this young lady was taking her family up there, and they were sitting quietly for hours on end. And I was so struck by not only their beauty, but also their poise and their confidence and the strength of the family, and asked them to pose for me. And started these as a multiple painting. Here's a young man on the left. I had asked them to bring a toy and also to dress the way they wanted to. And they all wore camo, much to their parents' chagrin. As I got the painting nearly completed, I started doing the glazing of the golds. And you can see here where I taped off the painting so I wouldn't spoil what I'd already done. Here's the little girl on the right. As you can see here, part of my technique is to paint all the painting at once. So I'm getting covering as much of the canvas as I can, and then bringing up the painting all together as at once in the end, if that makes sense. And here's the mother, my Madonna. And here's the final piece. What I try to do with what you see, the glazed fencing, is create a sacramental structure that replicated a Gothic arch and also the Gothic spires without repeating, having to pull in Rogier van der Weyden's sacramental arches again and again. So doing the same way, but doing it in a different way. This painting, as you can see, is also 12 feet wide. Paintings, I think, are about many things. They're about the paintings that you've seen. They're also about the subjects at hand. And they're also about the paintings that you want to create. And one of the paintings I had in mind was this work, again by Velázquez, a portrait of Pope Innocent X. And I wanted to use it as the sacramental structure for another altarpiece. And so I did photography. This is Riggins the dog, who was named after the hunky fullback John Riggins in the TV show Friday Night Lights. Here's his master, Brienne, here accepting the final rose. Here's the Pope's chair, which I shot with my iPhone camera at the Cincinnati Museum of Fine Arts, knowing that I was going to need a fancy chair down the road. And here's the composite photography that my brother, who's a Photoshop whiz, was able to do for me. So we have Riggins and Brienne in the fancy chairs, and we brought in the flooring from St. Paul's Cathedral in London, and you see the honeycomb paneling from the Cincinnati Art Museum. And here's the final work, in which I dropped out the paneling, trying to make the images of my two heroes in the shot pop forward, but also trying to tie the painting in more closely with Velázquez's Pope painting. Another painter that I was enamored with as I was making all these altarpieces was Caravaggio. And his work has been described as seeing his subjects as if lit by lightning. And I wanted to go for that effect in some of my paintings. And so here are my first efforts at that. Earlier, you had seen me standing on a chair with these paintings as tall as they are, they're 8 feet. It became very precarious. And so what I learned was when I stretched them, if I kept them very lightly braced, I could manhandle them by myself and turn them upside down. So a lot of the detail work at the top of the painting was done with the paintings upside down. And here's that final work, as you can see, 8 feet by 6 feet with my friend Sarah again in her goddess earrings. Another painting that I had in my mind was this by Jan van Eyck, the Arnolfini wedding. And I had these friends, the Arcegas, whom I was very taken with. I thought they had such a beautiful marriage. They were so good humored. They were so devoted to each other, so confident, so much fun. And I wanted to capture all of that in a painting. And so I did the photography, hung the satin again, which I've been getting a lot of mileage out of in my altarpieces in the studio. And here's the final piece. In this case, I wanted to put different kinds of halos behind them. So I went for a more medieval Byzantine halo here, more solid, so that I wasn't repeating the same wispy halos of the Caravaggio type. Several people have asked me, why are they wearing yellow hats? But I can assure you these are medieval halos. Another painting I've been thinking about a lot is Albrecht Dürer's self-portrait from 1500. And to my mind, this is one of the great paintings of the Western canon. And I wanted to paint some kind of response to this, but kind of like the Mona Lisa, I just didn't know how you do something like that. It's so iconic and so beautiful. There was no way to approach it until I saw this painting by the religious surrealist Michael Triegel. And you can see the pincer-like blessing greeting from Dürer's painting, in which Michael Triegel is actually trying to trap a fly. But in any case, this gave me a way into the painting. And this is my painting, my response to Dürer's painting, AD 2021. And this completed the last of the altarpieces that you see in the Wingate Museum exhibition. And I wanted to move on and do some different things. First of all, I didn't want to paint so large, but I did want to concentrate on the faces which the large figurative altarpieces didn't allow me to do. So I began looking at a series of other artists, in this case, Odd Nerdrum, who's brushy, Baroque style has always been very appealing to me. Rembrandt, of course, always Rembrandt. The Italian figurative painter Roberta Coney with her sloppy, beautiful, drippy painting, which I've really tried to emulate in many ways. And again, Jenny Saville, whose paintings you saw earlier, she's really a protein artist, and I try to move with her wherever she goes in her artistic journey. And these are the paintings that I came up with. I'm calling the series Person to Person, so they're really large facial portraits. This is Mother of Two. This, in my studio, you can see propped up on the ever-present paint buckets. This is a portrait of my friend Jeffrey Davis, who's a poet teaching at the university here, and I think it's one of the finest poets in America. You can see on his shoulders and around his beard and ears some of the loose brushiness that I'm trying to realize in this series. And then here are two small studies, which will become large paintings. Restaurateur, an impresario, a friend of mine who is a music blogger, publicist. I do these small studies which serve as a guidepost for the larger pieces. And then I give these to my models as payment for allowing me to steal their image. And I think we're getting ready to move to some questions. If we don't get to you and there's something you want to ask me or want to know, you can reach me at either of these addresses. I'm on Instagram at RayAllenParker and my website, rayparkerart.com. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Sarah.
Thank you, Ray. That was fantastic. So interesting. And I'm sure folks have questions. If you would, please pop them into the chat box and we'll address those. But why don't we go ahead and get started? Matthew, maybe you have a few questions top of mind from your perspective.
Yeah, for sure. There's a million questions. First of all, just thanks, Ray. What a privilege it is to bring my students to look at your work.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Conversations about it. It's just super inspiring, and just super inspiring for me and for them to, see this, somebody from Arkansas doing, such ambitious and incredible work. So
thank you.
This is our first big painting show at the Wingate. So it's just like, wow, that's such a good thing. For me, kind of maybe it's inside baseball for some people, but I think about, your process a lot, and, the role of photography. And we talked a little bit about this in our chat the other day. I think about your early painting, that profile, were your first painting that you were sort of really happy with.
Yes.
You look at that painting and there's a certain kind of like struggle with it, right? And maybe that's from being a young painter, but it's also from maybe, I don't know if you worked from a photograph in that one. Did you work from a photograph in that one?
No, actually, I worked from a mirror that I had, or a series of mirrors that I had set up in my cramped bedroom so that I could see my profile and painted that.
I think one of the reasons why artists use photographs, as I do occasionally too, is because it helps with the drawing. I'm just in a basic way. You can see where things are, you see the proportions and all that. And then you think about, all these thoughts I'm going to sort of put out and want you to just respond. You think about like Lucian Freud, right, who has these legendary relationships with his models. Has this one model come to his studio for a long time, right? And sort of some of those School of London people are like that. So, and then you think of like what it's like to work from a photograph. What does that do? And then you talk about you're choosing, from hundreds of photographs most of the time, right? So you're obviously going through this incredible editing process. For me, when I paint from life, I'm having this sort of direct experience with what I'm looking at, right? And then, so I wonder, what do you think about photography as it sort of mediates the process, other than just, helping with the technical aspects of it? What about your relationship with the model, say?
Okay, well, there's a lot to unpack there. Going back to that first painting, it was a struggle because I was a young artist and finding my style, and also, again, working in a very, very cramped area. And I discovered as I started taking my own photography that I developed that kind of relationship, which is so critical to the painting. I've never really painted anyone that I didn't know or that I didn't think that I knew very well. And I made reference to the one subject that I used in Local Server, where I thought I knew her. And when she came into the studio to be photographed, I realized she was a totally different person than I had imagined her to be. So in the photography session, which usually lasts an hour, hour and a half or so, I'm trying to equate myself with my subjects and confirm in my mind whether they are the person that I think they are. And at the same time, I'm peppering them with questions. So it's as much talking as it is photographing. And although I'll take, upwards of 500 photos, there's a lot of talking that goes on because I want to know who they are and what they think and how they feel, and try to learn as much about them as I can during that period of time. Because then I think of what I'm doing as creating a visual biography of them. So when the paint goes on the canvas, I'm not only trying to replicate their image, but I'm also trying to tell their story and why they look the way they do and why they have the lines or the marks or the feelings that are evidenced in their eyes or the turn of their mouth. And the funny thing that happens is I feel like I develop a further relationship with them as I'm going through their painting. They're not there. So it's just me and the image. And after a month of painting these people or 6 weeks of working with this image, I feel like I know this person really well. And then when I see them in person, it's often a little bit of a shock to me because they're there in the flesh. They're not this image. They're not this painting, and I have to relate to them as a person instead of as an image or the person that I have in my mind. So there is a mediation there, but it becomes very intense. Just me and the subject's image.
Yeah. Do you work with one? Do you edit it down to a group of photographs that you're working with? Like you might look at the photograph for this part or another photograph for that part, and then sort of combine them as you paint, or do you sort of pick? This is my one photograph I'm going to work with.
Usually with the head portraits, I usually stick with one image. With the altarpieces, as you saw, those are composited. I may have the body from one image, the head from another. I may have the eyeballs from yet another, or the legs from yet another. So they're very composited to get the look that I want, but also to get the posture that I need.
I've been recently myself doing some portraits through the iPad, talking to people on the iPad and drawing them as I see them. And I find it really productive not to be with the person, so I can sort of be more objective. There's not like, it just feels like maybe the photograph helps you become more objective.
Well, you mentioned Lucian Freud, and he is famous for having these modeling sessions that went all night long, day after day, month after month,
Right.
where even if he was painting the bed sheets or something, he would have the model come sit on the bed sheet so that it would always be the same. But it's all I can do to get a model to come and sit for an hour and a half. And I found what the iPad allows me to do is really zero in on a person's features. I can really get into their eyeballs,
Yeah.
or into the contours of their ears in a way that you never could with someone there sitting in front of you. You could never put your face that close to someone else's and see the details that are there without creating a really uncomfortable situation. So I'm able to do that and see all the detail that I want. And then I can pull back, as it were, in the painting and loosen the paint and have the detail I want, but loosen the edges to where I want, so that you see the painting as you would if they were literally sitting in front of you.
Do you ever do something where you have something really highly rendered and then you sort of knock it back with your more drippy quality?
Yes, all the time. And I've been doing more of that recently. I've been, as I pointed out, I've been looking at a lot of painters who do that very well lately, trying to figure exactly how they do that. And with each painting, I get a little better at it and try to get a little looser in the process earlier in the painting. But many of them, I paint it as well as I can all the way through, and then I start to destroy it, loosening it up, and in some cases, flinging paint from my brush or from a palette knife, um, dripping medium on it to get the paint to run, knowing that if I wreck it, I can always bring it back. I did it once, I can do it again. I can bring it back where I need to.
Maybe, thanks. Maybe I'll let some other people ask questions now.
Yeah, Ray, we have a comment and a question from Mary Kennedy. She writes, I was interested in your comment about not being ready to commit to a career in painting when you were a young person and waiting so many years to return to what is clearly your calling. I talk with many students with real talent, feeling like they have to settle for careers that are safe with a regular paycheck and health insurance, but not necessarily their dream or aspiration. Based on your life experience, do you have advice for those young people about choosing a career that is not just safe, but also fulfilling?
Well, I'd say, first of all, it's never too late to become the person you want to be. And whatever talents you have, it may seem like they're lying dormant, but they're not. They're aging like fine wine, and they will be there, and you can quickly access them when the time comes. I wish I could say that that I had notions of having reliable healthcare and a good paying job when I was that young. But that wasn't where my head was at that time. Going into English literature was not something I thought was reliable or dependable or even practical by any means. It was just something that I was powerfully, vitally interested in at the time. And I think painting scared me. It just demanded so much of me, and I really couldn't commit to the point, as I said, where I didn't draw or paint or pick up a pencil or anything. And I was talking to a friend the other day that I've worked with for years and years, and he said, "I can't believe you never mentioned this to me." this never came up in a conversation, but it's just something I totally hid. I don't think I wanted people to know about this. I was afraid of it. And it took me 40 some years to work up the nerve to come back to it again.
Thank you for that. Ray, I have a question. I'm wondering if you would share with us a little bit about what your experience has been with your subjects' reactions or responses to your paintings of them. I imagine it must be a little bit startling to see oneself in such a large, intimate painting. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's really all over the place. There's many reactions as there are subjects. Some people cry, which is the best. It makes me really happy when someone breaks down in tears. I know that I've captured them and I've moved when that happens. Sometimes people laugh uncontrollably, can't stop laughing. And other people sometimes don't know what to say. They're very, very quiet and are very confused and say thank you and depart without saying very much. So you never know.
Yeah, thank you for that. Matthew, what other questions do you have?
I'll just take myself off mute there. Ray, so you made that transition from, the kind of just straight up heads, and then you went to the more sort of religious inspired altarpieces. You talked a little bit about that in your talk, and we spoke earlier, you're not a religious person, and now you've pulled back from doing that, going more towards the heads. Looking back on this, the sort of religious format, what do you think, as a secular person about that?
Well, I had many things in mind. You have probably read, as everyone has, the typical amount of time that a person stands in front of a painting at a museum is something like 17 or 19 seconds. So I wanted to try to get people to stay in my paintings as long as possible. And I began thinking of this notion of religious symbolism, accoutrements as a way of helping people to stay in the paintings and hold on to them and find things that interested them. And at the same time, I was so moved by what I had seen. And again, I'm not a religious person per se, but I can't help by being moved when I see these grand paintings because of their scale, their intricacy, the passion that's involved in them. And I wanted all of that for my paintings, so that, like the Velázquez painting, people would be left weak in the knees by this. I wanted that kind of holy feeling, and try to accomplish that in my paintings.
Well, some of the, Christian imagery is so direct. I mean, there's Christ, I'm not religious at all. There's Christ on the cross. There's a human being tortured there. Or, Saint Sebastian, someone being, shot with arrows. You can't sort of help but to relate to that.
With the Ecce Femina, I was really trying to do a lot of things with that. As I mentioned, I was so taken by my friend Hannah, and I wanted to depict her in a way that realized her strength and beauty, and surround her with the elements that brought all that to the fore. That painting, unlike a lot of paintings I do, I really didn't have a clue what I was going to do, other than the one photograph that you see with Hannah with her arms outstretched. And then I thought, well, I'll go to my big book of altarpieces that I have and look through that and find an element to put behind it. And I came up with the element of the sky, which I stole from Jan van Eyck in the Ghent altarpiece. And then realized that, I couldn't have a 12-foot painting of sky. So then I laid in an altarpiece, and then that wasn't enough. And then I had to build in pillars. And then I thought that's not enough. And I actually had to chisel in paint-wise words that addressed Hannah and me and the painting itself, and then continue to lay in decals and other symbols. So it really grew organically. So that painting in and of itself is sort of a trip through the altarpieces of the 14th through the 17th century.
Wow, gives me a good excuse to look at a lot of our history as you're working.
Matthew, I know that you could come up with hours and hours of conversation points with Ray, and I'm cognizant that we are already at an hour. So I want to make sure that any questions from the audience get posted to the chat, and I'll ask one more question and turn it back to you, Matthew, for another question. But Ray, I wonder if you could tell us about what attracts you to painting a particular person. Is there anything in particular that stands out to you and makes you want to paint somebody?
I get asked that a lot, and I guess I don't have a pat answer for that. The painter Amy Sherald, who painted Michelle Obama recently, has said that she always looks for someone who has a secret that only she realizes. And I think a lot of my paintings are like that. I see people and I think I know something about them or realize something about them that nobody else realizes. And that may be that they're an extraordinarily beautiful person that people don't see, or they're a very sad person, which nobody sees, or in Hannah's case, they're a very, very strong, powerful person committed to personal transformation that no one sees. And so everyone I paint hits me in a different way, but they all have these powerful qualities that make me want to look at them and not stop looking at them. The painter Chantal Jaffe says, you become overwhelmed by these people and you're just so taken with them. And that's the effect that all of these people have on me.
I think they have that effect on viewers of your paintings as well. It's very nice to be able to just hang out with some of those new friends in the gallery. So thank you for that. We have another question from an audience member. Andy Byers asks, has creating a spiritual emotion or idea in your paintings shifted, changed, or altered your experience in regard to your own relationship to a universal life force affecting things? Or was it all simply using those images to help keep people looking longer?
Well, thanks to Andy. He's a good friend. And that's really a big question. I've dealt with that a little bit. I don't want to say that it was all an effort to keep people looking at the paintings. That seems a little bit cynical. But I will say, when I thought of the people and the kinds of paintings that I wanted to make, I really asked myself this one question: are they sacred? Is there something sacred about these people? And I began kind of casting around to the people I had in my life, in my acquaintances, and saying, are they sacred? And for instance, the Arcegas, the the couple that I did in the marriage painting, they just struck me somehow as having the spiritual quality, and not spiritual in the kind of we're going to heaven and play harps eventually, but just being beautiful, being honorable, and in touch with something that just affected you to be in their presence. And I wanted to capture that in all of my paintings. So it didn't change my feelings about a universal being. But to invoke another quote about the painter Jan van Eyck and the altarpiece at Ghent, art critics have said that he tried to make saints look like ordinary people. And I've taken the people in my life and tried to make them conversely look like saints, because I think they are saints in their way. They're sacred to me.
Mhm. We have another question. Barbara Satterfield would like to know if you have plans to submit your work to national portrait competitions, such as, I'm not sure I have the pronunciation correct here, but the Utwin Buchiver Prize associated with the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery.
The answer is a resounding yes. And as a matter of fact, I did submit the portrait of Jeffrey Davis, which is I call Poet of Light and Prayer, to the Outland Buchiver painting competition. That's sponsored by the National Gallery. It's every 3 years. And sometime this spring, I'll get an answer. Hope it's a positive one.
Yeah, keep us posted on that. That's exciting. Matthew, why don't we wrap up with one more question from you? Can you narrow it down to a burning question?
Well, I think actually those last couple questions were great about the religious significance, and I think you talk about, well, when I look at your paintings, I'm just so confronted with this person, and you're sort of with the humanity of this human, which is, I think, mission accomplished. I was thinking about the religious symbolism and its idea that painting is a form of visual communication, right? And your career was in visual communication.
Yes.
So what can you talk about maybe how you think of painting as visual communication in relationship to your career?
Okay, well, there's a couple of strands there. As I mentioned, with my time in the JCPenney photography studio, I got used to looking at people and looking at pictures of people and learning what differentiated a good portrait from a great portrait, and conversely, a not so good one. And I took that knowledge, or brought that knowledge, into my own paintings. And what I feel like I'm trying to do is make you see those people and confront them. And if you recall from my art statement, it's what I'm trying to do is have you confront these people, look at them, and know them in some way, so that the painting becomes like a visual biography. At the same time you're looking at them, you're also starting to think about yourself and the things that you like about yourself, that you find sacred perhaps, or remarkable, and how you compare to these other people. So it's a little bit of tying humanity together, I think, through these paintings.
What would like specifically separate, something that's good from something that's great, or something that's not so good to something that's really good? What would be some of those characteristics?
Well, I think that's in the eyes of the beholder a little bit, but the things that matter to me are the eyes, I find such power in the eyes. I find great expression in people's mouths. I try as well as I can to create a sense of form in the painting. So there's a dimensionality to it, so that the painting is, the act of painting is transcended. There's some kind of metamorphosis or transubstantiation to carry the religious symbolism just a little bit further. So this person becomes real for you, and you know something about them by looking at this painting. And for me, that's what makes a great painting. And ultimately, it's something that you can't stop looking at, like the Mona Lisa. Why do we look at the Mona Lisa? What is she thinking about? We have no idea, but we can't stop looking at her after all these centuries.
One thing I'm struck by is you must love people. I mean, you really must love people.
I can't stop looking at them. Just a very quick anecdote. Growing up in Egypt, Arkansas, there was this fair in Lawrence County near where we lived, and they had this event called the Porsche Picnic. It's on the 4th of July, the oldest dinner on the ground in the state of Arkansas, continuing dinner on the ground in the state of Arkansas. And you would go and they would attract all these people from everywhere in Northeast Arkansas. Tall people, skinny people, fat people, old people, young people, beautiful people, farmers, business people, politicians, all of humanity there. And you couldn't take your eyes off all these people. It was just the most extraordinary thing. And I just love to go there and see all these people. And I think I've carried that infatuation with these people into my paintings.
That's for sure.
That's a great anecdote to end on. Thank you for sharing that, Ray. Matthew, thank you for co-hosting, co-moderating with me, and thank you everyone for attending. I encourage you to visit our website, wingatemuseum.org, and I hope you'll come back next Monday for the talk with Leo Mazow. He's gonna be speaking also at 7 p.m. And extra special thanks to you, Ray. What you've shared this evening is fascinating and insightful, and I've really enjoyed it. So I thank you for sharing your time and yourself and your art with us. And thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you. This has been a great honor for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. All right, everybody have a great night. Be well. We'll see you next time.